So, the fight between Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos seems to be going on, with a small victory as it appears for Bezos. SpaceX is withdrawing its plans for a second Starlink configuration of its second-gen Starlink satellites. So what does this mean? Is it over for the expansion of Starlink to 30,000 satellites? Has Bezos won? In other news, the Department of Defense wants to ban kinetic anti-satellite missile tests. We're looking at you, China and Russia. And lastly, the Pentagon launches a new office especially for the investigation of UFOs. Now that is some pretty cool stuff. A lot to talk about, so stay tuned. We remember that in August 2021, the Amazon satellite broadband subsidiary Kuiper Systems objected to SpaceX's plans for an alternative configuration of its Starlink satellite constellation in front of the FCC. Amazon said that SpaceX's latest filing, quote, raises a number of issues that call for analysis and a potential response, end quote, and asked the FCC for a month-long delay before comments are due. SpaceX proposed two possible configurations, the second one basically as a fallback plan if the first one wouldn't work out. The FCC didn't really prohibit SpaceX's second configuration, but said that their application would be rejected if it, quote, is defective with respect to completeness of answers to questions, informational showings, internal inconsistencies, execution or other matters of a formal character, end quote. And before we continue, please like and subscribe to this channel, as this would greatly help us and motivate us to continue making lots of space videos. Your support is really vital. Thank you very much in advance. So apparently SpaceX has now decided to withdraw that second configuration, saying that it's no longer needed. In detail, SpaceX said, quote, as SpaceX explained in its amendment, it provided information about an alternative configuration for its Gen 2 system to account for uncertainty in development, given the long lead times often required for commission consideration of applications. SpaceX also made clear that it did not intend to operate both configurations and would inform the Commission about which configuration it would use as development became more certain. But much has changed in the intervening period, and SpaceX has exceeded its own expectations in the pace of developing both its Gen 2 satellites and its Starship launch vehicle. Accordingly, SpaceX hereby notifies the Commission that it will pursue Configuration 1 and abandon Configuration 2 proposed in the amendment, end quote. SpaceX's Starlink configuration includes around 30,000 satellites at altitudes from 340 to 614 kilometers. And as we said, they could start launching their Gen 2 Starlink satellites already with Starship at some point this year, when the Starship orbital flight has happened. But it is quite hilarious how SpaceX and Amazon were fighting in front of the FCC. SpaceX told the FCC that Amazon was trying to delay competitors, quote, to compensate for Amazon's failure to make progress of its own, end quote. Amazon responded by telling the FCC that, quote, the conduct of SpaceX and other Musk-led companies makes their view plain. Rules are for other people, and those who insist upon or even simply request compliance are deserving of derision and ad hominem attacks, end quote. SpaceX responded to that by calling Amazon's protest an irrelevant, quote, diatribe, end quote. Quite hilarious stuff, which you normally would not expect to be written in FCC communications. But hey, we have to say that Bezos, now basically pursuing a full-time career as a professional lawsuit filer, really at least managed to seriously enrage Elon Musk, as it seems. Which is understandable, because hindering competitors by filing lots of lawsuits isn't the fine English way, we'd say, especially if the company that files the complaints has not launched even a single satellite of their own. So now basically the FCC was to decide on the 30,000 satellite constellation by January 24th, but of course Amazon was seeking a 30-day delay, because delaying others is basically one of Amazon's biggest strengths. Quote, SpaceX's January 7 response to these questions raises a number of issues that call for analysis and a potential response, and Amazon and other parties will need adequate time to review and analyze SpaceX's responses to allow for a more complete discussion of the matters pending before the commission, end quote. Amazon also said that, quote, evaluating a constellation of this unprecedented scale will involve complex and novel issues, end quote. So in other words, Amazon seeks novel ways of delaying its competitors as long as possible until Amazon can also finally start launching their own Kuiper constellation. Fortunately, the FCC has only granted a small extension period for additional commentary until February 8th. Then we shall see how this drama will continue to unfold, but most likely the FCC will grant SpaceX's application and Bezos will have to maybe finally start pursuing other careers, apart from filing lawsuits. Maybe he will even start to run his company Blue Origin more efficiently, who knows, so that one day in the far future they might even be able to get their New Glenn rocket off the ground, because we must not forget that New Glenn will be crucial in order to deliver all these 3,236 Kuiper satellites to orbit. Without New Glenn, no Kuiper. So do it, Jeff. Start shifting your focus on getting stuff done at Blue Origin and stop occupying yourself too much with strategies on how to delay SpaceX. You can do it, Jeff. In other news, John Plum, the nominee for the post of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, testified on January 13th at a hearing of the Senate Armed Services Committee, in which he had some sharp words directed towards China and Russia regarding space security. Quote, "As members of this committee are all aware, the security environment facing the United States at this moment in history is a challenging one. China's behavior is a matter of grave concern. From its kinetic anti-satellite weapon tests in 2007 that created a persistent debris cloud, to the uncontrolled re-entry of a rocket stage last May, China has not yet demonstrated that it is a responsible spacefaring nation," end quote. Russia is another challenge, said Plum. Quote, "Russia views space as a key enabler of US military power and is developing technologies to disrupt and destroy US and allied space capabilities in crisis and conflict," end quote. We remember that really quite recently, on November 15th, 2021, Russia conducted an anti-satellite missile test, destroying one of its own satellites and causing thousands upon thousands of new pieces of space debris. He also added that space traffic management is absolutely essential and that a civil agency needs to be created in order to properly address that issue. That sounds nice and all, and while we commend his words, I personally think that a civil agency will not be enough. I mean, do we really think that China and Russia will feel obliged to adhere to the laws created by some civil space traffic control agency? Quite unlikely. Now, I don't know what the solution to this problem would be. Offensive capabilities installed by Space Force, but then that could lead to an arms race in space. So let us know what you think in the comment section, as I personally cannot see an easy way out of this situation without creating a space arms race between the US and the new Eastern Sino-Russian alliance. Okay, and now finally UFOs. How long have I waited to finally address UFOs on this channel? This is certainly a fascinating phenomenon that deserves attention, but also careful analysis, as it is certainly a topic where lots of weird or fake information is floating around. The creation of a new office was codified in the National Defense Authorization Act, passed in December, which calls for, quote, "establishment of office, organizational structure, and authorities to address unidentified aerial phenomena," end quote. It seems that the military security aspect is getting a high priority here, as Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who spearheaded the bipartisan measure, said, quote, "Our national security efforts rely on aerial supremacy, and these phenomena present a challenge to our dominance. The United States needs a coordinated effort to take control and understand whether these aerial phenomena belong to a foreign government or something else altogether," end quote. But if you are a UFO believer and are already cheering this move by the US government as ushering in a new era of observations of this strange phenomenon, basically the publicity this has created allows the Pentagon to create a new office for surveillance of airspace. which they would have wanted to create with or without possible UFOs. The new office will have the really beautiful name Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, AOIMSG. The Department of Defense (DoD) officials wrote in the announcement of the program that, quote, "The AOIMSG will synchronize efforts across the department and the broader US government to detect, identify and attribute objects of interest in special use airspace, and to assess and mitigate any associated threats to safety of flight and national security. DoD takes reports of incursions by any airborne object, identified or unidentified, very seriously and investigates each one," end quote. Okay, so basically the UFO phenomenon has given the US military more power to surveil even more stuff. Well, let's see what will come out of that. I personally am a bit of a skeptic. The notion that we are being watched by extraterrestrials seems a bit too human, a bit too egotistical to me, because it would assert that we are kind of special in order to receive such attention. But then again, it also cannot be ruled out, so it certainly does deserve to be taken seriously and deserves not to be ridiculed. There are more bizarre things in space which we thought impossible, for example black holes or time dilation, so the existence of extraterrestrial drones of sorts is not a crazy idea. Extremely likely that there are a few hundred, if not a few thousand, of intelligent civilizations in the galaxy alone, so the probability that one or a few of those have some automated drones exploring possible life-friendly exoplanets is not a too far out idea, because we will basically do the same already in a few hundred years. So yes, let us see what will come out of this. I hope this new office will not be hijacked and become some sort of aviation space surveillance office, and I hope that we will learn something interesting out of it in the coming years. So here you have it, we have finally talked about UFOs. Thank you dear viewers for watching, and our team here at To The Future wishes you all the best and a nice day. And until we learn something new about the UFO phenomenon, I would say on to the future!